I have just a line between 0 and 1. And so what I said, if I want to put 3 points, the 3 points are the following: 1 by 6, 1 by 2, and 5 by 6. Simply, this is the 3 points. So the minimax distance is 1 by 6. This is the distance. Okay. Alors, in dimension 2, you have this kind of figure, which is called the sphere recurving. The design points are here. So here I have put 10 points. 10 points. And the minimax distance corresponds to the intersections between this sphere. Here, you see, because so the minimax distance is the radius of this sphere, which has of equal radius. So this is a kind of geometrical problems of putting some sphere inside this domain, and you have this minimax distance, which is here. It's rather difficult to see this kind of thing. To simplify the problem, I said that the minimax criteria is impossible to compute. So some people have proposed to just look at the distance between the points of the design. So we do not consider the points of the domain, we just consider the points of the design. And so the idea now is to maximize the minimal distance of points of the design. So first we define what we call the min-dis distance. Min-dis distance is the minimal distance between points of the design. So you test all the distance of all the pairs of the points of the design, and you take the minimal. And the design that we look for is the maximin design. This is the one which maximizes this minimal distance. Okay? Maximize the minimal distance. So here you see that the points are put on the border, of course, as we maximize the minimal distance. The points are put on the corner or on the border. So this is an example in dimension 2 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points. Okay. As before, I can look at the problem in dimension 1. So if I put 3 points, it's easy to see that you will have the first point. The first point is 0, the second 1/2, and the third 1. Okay, this is in dimension 1, of course. With 4 points, what we have with 4 points, we have excuse me. We have 0, of course, 1/3, 2/3, and 1. Okay? Very natural. In dimension 2, you see this is another geometrical problem which is called the sphere packing problem. You try to pack some sphere of equal radius inside the square. Okay? And the maximin distance between will be the diameter of the sphere, because this is 2 times the radius. Like this. And the idea is to find this kind of pack, of optimal packing of sphere. So if you are interested by this kind of geometrical figure, you can find a lot of things on this website and on this website. I come back to the definition of maximin. So here you see the min-dis distance. It's a mean. Here I have the first point of my design, the second point of the design, and this is the notation of my design. Xi N is the size of the design, and MM means maximum. So this is the notation. This is the distance. Usually we take the L square distance, but you can take other distance like L1 or L infinity. And so when we compute the maximum in design, we say that we compute the max, argmax, in fact, I look of the design, and this is the design. Is there questions on this kind of things? No? Okay, so this is my two first properties, which are geometrical criteria. There are other possibilities, but this is the most known. Now I pass to what I call uniformity criteria, which is called the discrepancy. What we want to do is to measure the deviations between the distribution of my points, of the points of my design, and a uniform distribution. A uniform distribution in one dimension means that I have a regular subdivision of my segment in one dimension. In two dimensions, it's more complex to imagine what is a perfect uniform distribution. And what we look with this kind of discrepancy measure is to measure the deviation to its perfect uniform distribution. How to do this? In fact, what means a uniform distribution? From a geometrical point of view, it means that in my domain I have n points. If I take 1/2 of my domains, I have to have n over 2 points. If I take 1/3 of the volume of my domain, I have to have n by 3 points, etc. You see, when I divide my total volume on subvolume, I have to keep the repartition between the volume, the subvolume, and the number of points. This is the geometrical interpretation. So, to measure the deviation from the university, we will compare. This is curious, but this is what we do. We compare the volume of the intervals of all the sub-intervals of my domain and the number of points within these intervals. So to simplify, because it's a complex, very complex problem, to simplify, I consider sub-interval, and I consider first my, no, this is, excuse me, this is not Q, this is my global, yes, no, this is my global input space on 0, 1 dimension P, and I will consider subinterval, of course, included in this global space, and I will consider subinterval anchored, you understand anchored? Maybe not, but anchored on 0. So all this kind of subinterval where the minimal border is 0. Okay? This is more clear? So all these ones. And so my subintervals are defined by a vector t, which is a coordinate where I stop the interval on each axis. Okay, so this is t1 and this is t2. Okay? So I consider this subinterval, and now I consider the number of points in the subinterval divided by the total number of points, and I compare this to the volume, the ratio between the volume of the subinterval and the total volume. The total volume is 1. The volume of my input space, because I take a space between 0 and 1. and the volume of my subinterval is just the product of the t. The product of the t. Because my subinterval, I have simplified my problem by saying that my subinterval are this. So the product of the t allows to compute the volume of Q. Okay, so I compare this ratio and the ratio here. It works between, I am between 0 and 1, of course. The discrepancy measure is the sup on all the possible subintervals which exist. So the sup here on Q, any subintervals, the sup of this measure. This is the definition of the discrepancy, but I have to say that it's impossible to compute, of course. So we will simplify the problem. It's impossible to compute such measure because we have to look at all the subintervals. There is an infinity of subintervals inside a domain. However, we have succeeded to find a kind of definition of the deviation to uniformity. And so the goal is to minimize this discrepancy measure. Lower the discrepancy is, the more the point of the design fill all the whole space. This is the global idea. In dimension 1, in fact, this is well known, this kind of measure. This is called the Kolmogorov-Smirnov metric, I think. Because in fact we compare the empirical distribution with the distribution, with the uniform distribution functions, and we take the sup. So the discrepancy is this, and it looks like Kolmogorov-Smirnov criterion. Yes, I'm sure. Okay, so this is in dimension 1, but in dimension 1 it's not interesting to look at this kind of thing. Here we want to work in dimension 2 or larger. A pure Monte Carlo sequence has a discrepancy of this kind of order. In practice, I have said that it's impossible to compute this metric. So we will try some things to simplify. So the first way is to consider a L square discrepancy inside of the L infinity discrepancy. Here we have the sup norm, so it's L infinity. And now we take the L square norm. Okay, so I write this. You have here the integral. Here you have the previous definition of the discrepancy. So you see I have simplified, excuse me. Here I have the term, the number of points inside the subinterval, and I have written here 1 over n, the sum of the indicator that the point is inside the subinterval. So this is the same thing. This is the number of points inside the subinterval divided by n. Okay, so this is the S square norm. But of course, I don't know how to compute this again. So some people have proposed, some people, excuse me, I'll go back after to the previous slide, but here just to say that this author has performed very theoretical work to find analytical expression of the discrepancy. There are various forms of discrepancy. It depends on the kind of subintervals you consider. So if you consider intervals with minimal boundary 0, what I said encore at 0, you have the modified square discrepancy. If you consider all the intervals with boundary 1 vertex of the unit cube. Okay. You obtain what he calls the center L2 discrepancy, and I have put the formula here. In fact, this is a very simple formula. Here, so you have a factor, power by p. Here you have the sum of products, sum on the number of points, and product on the number of dimensions, product on the coordinates of the points, and you have this kind of thing to compute. So here you have the coordinates of the point I, the coordinate k of the point I. Same thing, and here you have a sum on pairs of points. So between points I and point G. So okay, it can take some time to compute this kind of thing. If you have 1,000 points and if P is of dimension 100, it can take of time, but it's possible, no problem to compute this kind of thing. So I will not explain how we pass from this to this. The theory is rather complex. I will not explain it, but if you are interested by this thing, you can refer to this book. Before I continue, I will just make a little link with what we see Tuesday about Monte Carlo and the integration problem. So I have said that the integration problem consists by computing the integral of a function, of course, on a domain, and Monte Carlo proposed just to take the empirical estimator by creating some random sequence, so some sequence of random points. Okay, we take n random points and we approximate the integral by this. We know that it's unbiased. The mean of this estimator is I. The variance is, this is not n here. This is f. Okay, excuse me. So the error is on the order of 1 over square n. We will have this same kind of things now with a loud discrepancy sequence instead of a Monte Carlo sequence. This is why the discrepancy is well known. This is for considering integration problems, and it will increase the speed of convergence of Monte Carlo. So in integrations, loud discrepancy sequence can be easily used to perform an integration problem. It comes from the general property which is called Koczma-Lauka inequality. And this inequality says that the error of approximation of this problem is bounded by a variation and the discrepancy of the points. This term is rather complex. This is a very general definition of the variation of a function, and this term is just the discrepancy that I have defined. It is interesting because we separate here what depends on the functions and what depends on the points. So, okay, this we cannot control. This depends on the functions that we integrate. So we have no control on this. But this we can control because we choose the points of integrations. So if we minimize discrepancy, we minimize the bound, and so maybe we minimize the error. Okay? So this is called loud discrepancy sequence, when we try to have a very loud discrepancy. And this is also famous under the name quasi-Monte Carlo. Maybe some of you know this term, quasi-Monte Carlo. So it's not Monte Carlo, it's quasi-Monte Carlo. And the idea is to have deterministic sequence. This is not random, this is deterministic in order to minimize the integration error. What we know is that when we have a loud discrepancy sequence, we have this. So you see that we gain something with respect to this. Here we have 1 over square of n, and here we have log n powered by p divided by n. And so this is smaller than this. The rate of convergence is larger, the rate of convergence is larger than this one. But the problem is that, I don't know how to say that in English, on n'a rien sans rien, we have nothing without nothing. Because here you see that I have a p. So now my rate of convergence depends on the dimension. It depends. Here, the advantage of Monte Carlo is that I have no dependence on the dimensions, and now I have a dependence on the dimension. Is there a question now? Okay, so I come back to my history of discrepancy. There are several definitions depending on the norms and on the intervals that I consider. So I consider the L square discrepancy. This is the general form. Okay. And if I want the discrepancy, consider the problem in the dimension p. I may want to consider also all the point projections in on lower dimensional subspace. So in this case, you see, I add a term where I sum all the discrepancy on subspace, on all the subspace of dimension p minus 1, p minus 2, etc., etc. So I don't develop this aspect, but this is just called modified L square discrepancy, and this kind of discrepancy are very, very interesting. This is what we use when you create this central L2 discrepancy. Okay, so some example now. I compare regular grid, Monte Carlo sequence, and quasi-Monte Carlo sequence. So at the left, you have a regular grid of 64 points here and 256 points here, okay? Random number, Monte Carlo sequence here, so you see the kind of randomness. And the quasi-Monte Carlo sequence, which is called here the Sobol sequence. Maybe some of you know Sobol if you make some integration problem. This is the most famous quasi-Monte Carlo sequence. So you see, what do you see between this figure and the other? You see, with respect to a Monte Carlo sequence, you have a kind of regularity. But with respect to a regular sequence, you have a kind of randomness. So it's a mix. It's a mix between the regularity and the randomness. And it's a uniform sequence. We have created uniform sequence on the space of dimension 2. Alors, you have some figure like alignment that you can observe. Okay? It can cause some trouble, this kind of alignment. But it's the effect of creating this uniformity. I would like to explain, I have the time, I would like to explain one sequence, which is called Alton. I would like to explain this because it's very easy to explain. Okay, sorry. No problem. I will explain on my... So, Alton sequence is based on taking prime numbers. So for the first dimensions, I take the first prime number 2. The second dimensions, I take 3. Okay, so I will stop after I take 5. So if I take just x1 and x1, I take 2 and 3. And I created some fraction based on this prime number. So the first fraction is 1 over 2, and here is 1 over 3. Okay. So my first point in dimension 2 with the Halton sequence will be this. Okay. After, I have to create subtractions again in the base 2, and here subtraction again in the base 3. So the second point for the base 3 is 2 over 3, and here I take 1 over 4. Okay, 1 over 4. After, I can take 3 over 4 here, and here I take 1 over 9. So you see this kind of construction, which is an algebraic construction on prime number by taking some fractions. So if you look at the figure, it creates a strange figure. So I put 1 over 2 here and 1 over 3. This is my first point. And after, my second point is 1 over 4 here and 2 by 3 here. My third point is both, and I said 1 over 9. Okay, etc. And in fact, it will fill regularly after maybe I have another point here, another point. It will fill regularly the space. So the sequence has an order. The sequence has an order. The first point is in the middle, and after you regularly complete the space. We can see this this afternoon. We will see this afternoon by creating some Halton or Sobol sequence. You will see the points. It will be clearer than here. This is an example. I take a Halton sequence. A Halton sequence, okay, in dimension 8, but I project it on the first two dimensions, x1 and x2. Here, x1 and x4. So you see that, no problem. I have a regular fill. I regularly fill the space. And I project now in dimension 3 and 6, and dimension 7 and 8. And so you can see some kind of pathologies. The pathologies are created by taking these regular fractions, by increasing the prime numbers. And so it creates some kind of pathology. Here the pathology, you understand pathology? It's English. The pathology is that you have kind of alignment of cluster in these subprojections. And here the pathology in the projection 7 and 8, which is well known, is that you have pure alignment and an empty space which has been created by this construction of regular fraction. So this can be a problem when we explore the model, because you will have no point for this kind of combination of x7 and x8. Maybe, unfortunately, something happened in your system for this particular combination of x7 and x8. So our goal will be to avoid this kind of situation, because we want to avoid the surprise. And so our goal is to have a regular fill of the space. Okay? To finish with this, I have just here put an illustration of the speed of convergence. I have explained that loud discrepancy sequences have a better speed of convergence in terms of error of integration. Donc we often observe that the convergence of a Lau discrepancy is 1/n, the convergence rate, for dimensions smaller than 40. This is a general observation and heuristic observations. So here I have put an example in dimension 3 on a particular nonlinear function, and I compare the Monte Carlo convergence in blue and the quasi-Monte Carlo convergence in red. So this is the theoretical, this thing, and this is the observed on the particular functions. So what we can observe, this is the absolute error in a logarithmic scale, and this is the number of points in the logarithmic scale. Okay? So I increase the number of points, and so I decrease the integration or error, hopefully. So for the Monte Carlo, we observe that the rate speed, this is the theoretical rate speed, it's rather respected. Okay, of course, I have some noise due to the particular case, but globally, I have to look at the trend of this thing, and I see that globally, I follow the speed that has been predicted. And for the quasi-Monte Carlo sequence, it seems that I have better speed than the theory predicts. Okay? And I observe that the speed is much larger than the one of Monte Carlo. So this is an illustration example to show that if you have only 100 points to compute a mean of the functions, it's better to use quasi-Monte Carlo than Monte Carlo. But the problem is that with quasi-Monte Carlo, you cannot estimate the error. With Monte Carlo, you can estimate the error with two methods. First, by using the central limit theorem that I explained Tuesday. Second, by using bootstrap. Okay? Bootstrap is based on replication of the initial sample. The hypothesis of bootstrap is that you have an IID sample, independent, identically distributed sample. Quasi-Monte Carlo is not independent. It's a deterministic sequence. So you cannot use bootstrap with quasi-Monte Carlo. You can do, but it's an error. So if you use bootstrap with a quasi-Monte Carlo sequence, the errors you estimate is not a good estimation. So this is just to explain that quasi-Monte Carlo is better, but if you have to control precisely the error you made, it's better to use Monte Carlo. So it's the life. Okay? Okay. Now I pass to the last part of my talk, the important property, robustness in terms of subprojection. Okay. I have explained with my little example of putting 3 points and 4 points. I have explained that I like to avoid some collapsing of the points when I project the points on one dimension. Why? I have explained this. I have said that, in fact, the function g, most of the times, is not of dimension p. Dimension p is the dimension of x, but we have defined what we call the effective dimension, which is the real dimension of the function g. The real dimension is that the function g depends only on inputs that are contained in x, but not on all the inputs. If you have 100 component in X, probably G depends only on 10 or less components. So the effective dimension, this is this thing. In the truncation sense, this is the number of influential inputs, and P1 most of the time is much smaller than P. So this is the third definition of the effective dimension of a function. And the effective dimension in the superposition sense is the higher order of influential interactions. So the interactions I have explained to you, that this is an interaction effect between two inputs, but you have also interaction between 3 inputs, 4 inputs, and so on. Most of the time, you don't have an interaction of order P. It will mean that it's a conjunction of all the combination of the P variables that has an effect. It not happens. Most of the time you can have interaction of order 2 or 3, and the effective dimension in the superposition sense is this higher order or influential interactions. So this is the second thing. What is very important is the first, the truncation sense. So once I have said this, I can say that I need design, this space-filling design, it means, which keeps their space-filling properties in low-dimensional subspace, when I project the points on all the subspace. Because I can have a very good space-filling design in dimension P, but if my system G depends only of one variable, I have to verify that the good properties in dimension P is also respected in dimension 1. Okay? So this is what I say, this is good, this is bad. This is bad because when I project the point, I have collapsing. So I have only 2 points here and 2 points here. I have no robustness with subprojections. And here, when I project the points, you see I have 4 different values regularly spaced. And here I have 4 different values regularly spaced. So I have robustness in terms of subprojections. So LHS, what is LHS? I will explain just after. This is the most famous space-filling design. So this is just for the projection of first dimension. And also you can verify the robustness for projections on 2-dimensional subspace. Okay? So it's more complex, but you can also try to do this. Alors, LHS, which is called Latin hypercube sample. I will explain this by hand, and after I will give the algorithm. So the idea is to have a regular distribution of the point on each marginal, on each 1-dimensional subspace. So to do this, uniform projection on margins. So I have P variables, endpoints, P dimension endpoints. To do this, it's very easy. I divide each dimensions in n interval, and I ensure that I have only 1 point in each stratum. So if P equal 2, n equal 4, I divide my domain in 4 intervals of equal size. Okay? For the first, for the second. And now I can guarantee that I have only 1 point per each stratum. So you put a random point, for example this one. It falls here. So I said now I don't want any point in this stratum and in this one. So I put a random point in the other part of the space here, and now I banish this and this. I put another point, I have this space, I banish this and this, and if you make the exercise on your paper, you will see that there are only one case which is not banished. This is this, and you put the point inside. Okay? You can make the exercise. So this is the principle of the Latin hypercube sample. And here I put 3 examples of Latin hypercube sample. The points are on the nodes. It's not important. They can be on the cell, but on the node is the same thing. Alors, which Latin hypercube sample do you prefer between the 3? The first, the second, and the third? Excuse me, something say someone say something? Or you can say 1, 2, or 3 by random. 3? Second, yes. The second is the best. The third is the worst. But the third is also a Latin hypercube sample. In this example, I can put a point here, 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 and here. I have a Latin hypercube sample. But it's a bad idea, because you leave a very large unexplored zone if you do this. But this one is very regular. I have no empty zone. This one is good, but here I have empty zone, and here I have 2 points which are very close each other. Okay, so the good answer is this one. Alors, how to build a Latin hypercube sample? It takes 2 lines in R. Here you have more lines, but this is because I build the matrix. So this is called the Stein method, because this is an article of Stein, Michael Stein maybe, I don't remember, in 1989. So you build a matrix, n lines, p column. No, here, this is your matrix, n line, p columns. This is a matrix of little perturbations that I will explain after. Because you have 2 kinds of hypercube sample. You can have Latin hypercube sample regular, but you can also add a little noise, like here, to put the points randomly in each cell. You see? Here I put the point on the nodes, but you can also slightly perturb in each cell to add some randomness. So the first thing to do is to make a permutation. It's in French, so you can learn French here. Permutation of integers, vector of permutation of integers. So sample give you the sequence of size n, but with a permutation. So you see, for each dimension, for each input, I create 1 permutation. This is just to transform this in probability with a kind of randomness. And after I take the compile value. I will explain this afternoon more deeply. But if you do this for each dimension, in fact, you will have what you look for. You will have all the points will be in different stratum. In fact, the permutations is for each dimension. So imagine this is my first, second, third, and fourth point. So for the first dimension, I have created the permutation 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1, because here you see that the point is in the fourth stratum, the second point is in the third, the second stratum and the first stratum. So 4, 3, 2, 1. And for the dimension 2, the permutation is 1, 3, 4, 2. Okay? It's clearer with this? And so by doing this, we ensure that each coordinate, each stratum of each coordinate will be only tested once. Okay, so this is, once you have do this, you can also add a probability distributions. Here I have explained by imagining that this is a uniform distribution, so I have stratum of equal size, because I have equiprobability with the uniform distribution. But if I want to have a normal distributions, I can make this easily by this quantile transformation. Quantile selon la loi means quantile following the probability law. Okay? So you can make a quantile transformations, and so you will have, for example, on this example, my second component is a Gaussian, is a normal distributions. So the stratum are not of equal size, but that they are of equal probability. So I have very concentrated stratum here, and I have large stratum in the tail of the distribution. So you can apply this transform to have a latent hypercube sample, which follows the law, the probability density function of each marginal. To finish, I have 5 minutes. I want to now, I have good LHS, but you see that sometimes, if I build a LHS, so there are some randomness inside the building, because the first point is chosen randomly, the second also. Just the last point is not chosen randomly. So there are some randomness. And maybe I can have bad luck and I find a bad LHS. So the idea now is to optimize the LHS using a space filling property that I have explained before. For example, the maximin or the discrepancy criteria. The simplest method would be, I don't know the word in English, but this is brute force approach. I made many LHS, for example, 1000, and I choose the best. I compute on each design, on each LHS, I compute the criterion, phi. Imagine that I want to maximize phi, for example, the maximum criterion. I compute 1000 times this criterion on the 1000 different LHS, and I take the best. So I have applied this, and I find a good LHS on 2 dimensions and 16 points. Well, however, you see the combination problem. This is the number of possible latent hypercube samples. So as yesterday, the talk of Professor Chaudhuri was a nice introduction, finally, to this slide. I will use an optimization algorithm to minimize phi. Simulated annealing that he explained yesterday. So why simulated annealing? Because this is a very complex combinatorial problem with a very large number of solutions. So it's impossible to find the solutions, factorial n power by p. So imagine if n equals 10 and p equals 10, I don't know how to compute this, but it's too much. Okay, alors, the idea of the optimization algorithm is first to initialize a design, so you choose an LHS, and a temperature. Yesterday, Professor Chaudhuri didn't talk about the temperature, but this is the same. I don't remember the coefficients that he used. But here the temperature is in the denominator of my Gibbs distribution. So I initialize a design and temperature, And after, I have to make something. I have to define what is a perturbation of a design. Because in this algorithm, I will explore the space, but I will not explore randomly the space. I will, at each iteration, I perturb the design with a rule. I compute the new criterion, and I keep the new solutions with a certain probability. If the new solution is better, I keep it. If the new solution is not better, I will keep it with a certain probability. Okay, so this is the idea of the simulated annealing. And this probability will decrease in function of time. And so, after a large number of simulations, this probability is 0. It means that I not accept worse result than the one I have. So now I have to define the perturbation. How to define a perturbation of a Latin hypercube sample? The idea that I have been proposed by these authors in 25 years ago is very simple. You see, here I have a LHS, and he proposed to keep the structure of LHS. LHS is a structure rather rigid, but it suffices to exchange two components of 2 points. So I choose one pair of points, so I choose this pair randomly. I choose one coordinate randomly, so this one. And so I exchange, you see, the coordinate of this with the coordinate of this, and the coordinate of this with the coordinate of this. So it's a very little perturbations, and I recompute my criterion phi. So what is fine with this in my problem is that with the mean dist criterion, you remember mean dist, this is a minimal distance between the 2 points of my design, and the discrepancy criterion, I don't have to recompute all the terms of the mean dist and the discrepancy, because I have exchanged just 2 components. So to recompute phi of xi nu, it's not costly. I have just to recompute a little term. Okay, so example, a maximin, so a Latin hypercube sample that I have optimized with the maximin criterion. This I have maximized with the discrepancy criterion. And for comparison, a Sobol sequence, which is a quasi-Monte Carlo design. So in dimension 2 with 16 points. What we can see with the Sobol sequence is that Sobol sequence is based on regular fraction on base 2. Alton, it was on base 2 for the first 3 regular sequence. All is based on base 2 and on very complex algebraic manipulations. And so it's fine with Sobol, but there is kind of regularity, and I think I prefer this, in fact. I prefer this because here I see some points which are concentrated here, and in this kind of solution I don't have some concentration of points. So I prefer this. Sobol has other advantages, and I will finish with this. This is just a summary. I prefer to finish on this. So here I propose a synthesis on the properties of what I have shown this morning. Monte Carlo, quasi-Monte Carlo for Alton-Sobol. There are many others on quasi-Monte Carlo sequence. LHS optimized with a discrepancy, and LHS optimized with the distance criterion. So the 3 properties are the following. Is there some patterns, some alignment of the points that I want to avoid? Do I have a sequentiality property? It means that I have an ordering of the points that I propose. It's very interesting, this property is that when I have n points, I compute my code with the endpoint, but maybe I find that it's insufficient. So I want to perform n new points. And so it's interesting to have the n following points. Okay? And with this kind of structure, we don't have this property. We have no, but we try to do actually by some research works. With Sobol, we have this property. I have explained that this is a construction, a regular construction, point by point. And last, the dimension reduction that I have explained when I have some robustness when I take the sub-projections. So you see that, for example, this one is interesting. With this one, LHS optimized with discrepancy criterion. I have no alignment. I have no sequentiality, but we try to do actually. And I have good properties about dimension reduction. And with the criterion min list, I have not these properties of dimension reduction. So I let this now because it's time to break. If you are interested by all these topics, there are very good books. I can propose this book about Quasi-Monte Carlo, which is the reference, this book. And about space filling design, this is the reference of a Hong Kong researcher, which is called Fang, Kai-Tai Fang. And more mathematical issues about all this. This is a very good paper. Okay, so thank you very much.
Any question?